Welcome to SAVE Colonie's Water Resources Forum, and thank you for joining us this evening to learn more about water resource issues. I'm Susan Weber from SAVE Colonie. I'm the moderator for tonight's program. And don't you wish you were me? No. We've all heard that water is life, but most people seldom consider where their water comes from beyond the tap. We in Colonie have the Mohawk River as our main drinking water source, with a small well field nearby. We have the Stoney Creek Reservoir that the town is now offering for sale. For emergencies, there's also an agreement with the City of Albany under which the Latham Water District can purchase potable water if it's available, if the City of Albany has extra, doesn't need it. I invite everyone to our SAVE Colonie website to learn more about the town's justification for the sale, what we view as the lack of relevant data that they've provided, and information to back up their justifications, and what more we need to know before an informed and reasoned decision can be made. But tonight, we are focusing on broader issues. The types of raw water sources available to municipalities, their vulnerabilities and stresses, and how these are measured, and the ways in which local decision-making can affect a community's vital water resource future. How can water resources so important be protected? We're joined tonight by three people with extensive experience with water issues. Union Geology professor John Garver, Waterkeeper Water Quality Program scientist Jennifer Epstein, and Bill Carlos, a member of the Town of Poughkeepsie's board, who has been on the local joint water board for 8 years. I'll introduce each one with more detail as they begin their presentations. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat or on Facebook, and we will ask as many as we have time for at the end of the evening. But first, let's hear from some local people about our Stoney Creek Reservoir in a video by Justin Wamba.
Water is life. No water, no life.
This is the kind of decision that the town is making that's going to affect everyone here forever.
And we'll be in crisis if we're dependent on the Mohawk for drinking water. And here we are, we own a reservoir with clean water and we're hooked up to it. Why would we ever give that up?
The Stoney Creek Reservoir is 1,000 acres of pristine woodlands and water located in southern Saratoga County. It's virtually untouched for the last 70 years. It's the fourth largest water body in Saratoga County. And if this were parkland today, it would rank in the top 10 of all parks in the Capital District. I'm a member of Friends of Clifton Park Open Space.
I'm a long-term resident of the town of Colonie. I've been in Latham since 2004.
I've been a resident of the town of Colonie for about 50 years now.
The Stoney Creek Reservoir exists because people had the foresight to invest in it as a life insurance plan.
We are connected to it. It provides a fantastic backup water system. If you know what's going on right now in the Northwest, there's a huge drought that's unheard of. That kind of thing can happen here as well. When it does, we have backup with Albany, but Albany water system is also going to be subject to any kind of a drought that would affect the Colonie water system. Having a backup reservoir, as we do here, is just an obvious no-brainer.
I happen to have a personal connection when I was a little boy, and they built the reservoir. The big-time contractor that was hired to build the water main and run it over to the reservoir, which means crossing the river with it, couldn't get it across the river. And they finally got my father and his tow truck, and he winched it across the river back in the early 50s, and I was there to watch. I've always felt a connection since then.
In the event of a catastrophic environmental disaster on the Mohawk River that we count on for our water, we will continue to have the Stoney Creek Reservoir, which only costs us $2.80 per person per year, according to the information that the town has provided us.
So the worst case scenario would be for the reservoir to be sold to a developer for the highest price.
If we are to sell this and then have a problem in the future, everyone is going to say, what were they thinking? How could we have given up that kind of an asset for a few dollars now?
I've spent many, many years of my career reviewing and developing RFPs. I'm really struck by the town's current proposal to sell the reservoir because of the lack of due diligence that they have done, or apparent lack of due diligence given the lack of information that's available from the town. And in this case, there are just so many questions that the town is unable to answer concerning what they've considered in the way of options.
Everything upstream that happens is going to affect the filtration plant.
The idea that we're entirely reliant on this river at present for our drinking water is not a sustainable prospect.
Any attempt to sell this is just short-sighted political gain, not reasonable.
While the new Albany Interconnect plan is useful, that's more like a short-term disability insurance plan. It won't cover us long-term. So do the math. Fresh water is priceless.
This reservoir is an important regional environmental resource, and we urge you to support the protection of this important resource for future generations.
The reservoir is unique and it should never be given up.
So now let's get on with our main topic tonight, the Mohawk River Watershed, Colonie's primary source of water. We have a state-of-the-art treatment plant run by professional managers with plenty of experience, but we need to know more about this water source to protect it for the future. So I'd like to introduce Professor John Garver. John Garver is a professor of geology at Schenectady's Union College. His areas of expertise are the Mohawk River and its watershed, sedimentation, tectonics, landslides, and ice jams. Research in the Mohawk watershed is directed at understanding hydrology, sediment budget, I bet that's all about the amounts and the types of sediment, and the effects of climate change in the watershed. Through the Geology Department at Union, Dr. Garver has been instrumental in organizing and hosting mostly annual symposiums on the physical aspects of the Mohawk watershed, highlighting recent and ongoing work in the watershed. Dr. Garver's many publications illuminate issues facing the Mohawk watershed, and we post them on our website at SAVE Colonie. So, Dr. Garver, take it away.
Thank you so much for hosting this, and it gives us an opportunity to sort of think through and talk about water resources in the Capital District, but obviously Colonie in particular. And what I'd like to do today is just highlight a couple of things that I've been thinking about since I first heard in the early part of this year about the sale of the Stoney Creek Reservoir. And it has to do really with water resources and municipal water supplies. But it's intimately tied into the issues related to the Mohawk River and the quality of water in the Mohawk River. I'm going to be brief here, and if you want to read more about it, I have a monthly newsletter that I publish at mohawk.substack.com, and the last entry that I posted about a month ago was about this, actually the sale of the Stoney Creek Reservoir, where I looked into a number of things and started thinking about what it means to have to have a raw water source that would be relying on the Mohawk River if the Stoney Creek Reservoir were to be sold. A lot of the thinking process came into focus for me at this the meeting on the 20th of April of this year, where the information was presented. And from that, three primary issues really came to the forefront of my mind about thinking through this particular problem. One of them is that the Latham Water District has an interconnect agreement with the Albany Water Board, as Susan had mentioned earlier. And many municipalities in the Capital District have interconnect agreements, and it's a good way to do municipal water. If something happens and you have a problem, you can rely on your neighboring communities to support you while your system is down and being fixed or whatever happens to be the issue. The second thing is the Colonie Dam that holds the Stoney Creek Reservoir in place appears to be expensive and a liability. And so it sounds like there's an issue there, but I haven't been able to get really to the bottom of the sort of the documents and issues related to the dam. But it is apparently been inspected and it's safe. The final thing, and the thing that's most important to me, is if the sale goes forward, the Latham Water District will have to rely on the Mohawk River for its roads. There's just no doubt about it, because the field is not that the community. And so it's this last struck me thing that I think is rather important and worth thinking about. And certainly I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about the Mohawk and issues. And so I guess I can sort of summarize and say that on a normal day-to-day basis, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. The new plant is fantastic and it produces high-quality water for Colonie. No question about that. But I teach natural disaster. The things that I think about is sort of expecting the unexpected. So there's legacy issues, there's chronic issues, and then there's potentially catastrophic issues that can happen on the Mohawk. So we have a rich industrial past that used the Mohawk as disposal, actually. We have chronic issues associated with sewage, and this is you're going to see this is going to be a really big sort of theme tonight, because it's a lot of good people are working on this particular problem. And then finally, catastrophic issues, which in my mind really is primarily train derailment. And train derailment is a really, really big potential problem. There's been a number of small derailments. There's been a number of very large and important derailments in the country. This is a picture along the Mohawk at Hoffman. So this is just upstream from Schenectady. So remember that if we're talking about the intake, the Latham Water District intake, the primary focus should be upstream, because that's where the problems can arise. But this is a tanker train. These are tankers filled with oil coming from out west. I counted them. There are 110 cars. It's 3.3 million gallons of oil going down the Mohawk daily. And so the oil boom is actually continuing, and that crude oil is moving down the Mohawk. And remember, the Mohawk is actually just upstream from Schenectady is rather narrow, and so this ends up meaning that many of the tracks are right next to the river. So there was very visible spill response a couple of years ago. So here's a picture I took in 2015 of a Canadian Pacific emergency response. But even in the spill response documents, they readily admit that a derailment and oil going into the river in the winter would be nearly impossible to contain. And the reason for that is that in the winter, the river is non-navigable. And it's very, very difficult and dangerous to get onto the river. So this can be a real big problem. There's a lot of legacy issues, and one of them that sort of piqued my interest, and I wrote about it. And so one of my entries in my notebook is called Radioactive Fish, number 1 and 2. And this has to do with radionuclides that were dumped into the river from CAPL, Knowles Atomic Power Labs, just upstream from the Vischer Ferry Dam. And research by geologists at the RPI has shown that not only is that pool have still a considerable number of radionuclides, but they get mobilized during big storm events. And in fact, they've been able to demonstrate that because there's a very distinctive ratio of several specific radionuclides, that material actually makes it all the way down basically to New York City. So there's a huge load there that needs to be sort of factored into issues, especially with big floods when this stuff can get remobilized. But I think, to me, one of the most remarkable and stunning things that's happening in the watershed right now is the hydrology is changing in a really, really dramatic way. We're just seeing so much more water than before. So we're sort of in uncharted waters in terms of annual flows, peak flows, and also minimum flows, as we learned last year. So very simply put, we're getting a lot more precipitation. We're getting a lot more extreme events, and actually we're getting warmer winters as well. So these are just real quick graphs here that show about 120 years of precipitation. So we're out over here, and this is an increase of about 1.9 inches per decade, or about a 16% increase since 1980. And the other bit of a wild card is that we're getting warmer winters, and the winters are significantly warmer, and they're increasing at about 1.4 degrees. And this is December, January, February since about 2000. And of course, many of us know or recognize that the past couple of winters, the mean temperature has actually been above freezing, which means we don't have ice, and that has important implications for the ecology of the river. But going back to precipitation, if we take precipitation and we sort of overlay the increase of precipitation with the problems associated with infrastructure, leaky pipes, cracked, clogged, and broken pipes in municipal centers, and these are from Schenectady. And again, Schenectady matters because it's just upstream. But Schenectady is wrestling with some issues, and here these are some pictures. The center picture is a sanitary sewer, so that carries sewage to the sewage treatment plant. But if it gets clogged or overwhelmed in big events, it overflows. And it turns out this one overflowed and went into the stormwater, and then from the stormwater went into the Hans-Grootekill, and then it went into the Mohawk. So we have a major challenge in society right now in upstate New York, and that's our pipes are leaking, our pipes are broken. And that means that there is excess sewage and problems and nutrients that go into the river. So we saw this last summer actually in a really sort of interesting way. So this is a plot that shows the annual January through December flow on the Mohawk River in daily discharge. So we see that the daily discharge is around 8,000 CFS, and so we go through the summer. But what happened last year, 2020, is the black line. We dipped down into relatively low flow, and everything here in brown is flow drought, really, is flow below the 5% exceedance, which means that it's very low, and it was only flowing about 400 CFS. And so in the Mohawk, that's not very much. Well, what happened is because we had nutrient loading related to leaking pipes and sewage, we had a big algal bloom. And algal blooms are a really, really big problem for those municipalities that take water from rivers, because there can be toxins and there can be an increase in total organic carbon, which complicates, it's not impossible, but it complicates the preparation of the water by the plant. And the final point is that I think it's important to bear in mind that there's a lot of people doing really good work on trying to understand where these problems are and how to address them. And so Union College is one of the places we've been doing this on a regular basis to try to understand where the contamination is. And so this is Eva Willard-Bauer, who recently just completed her thesis, and she's been doing pathogen testing. And so this is the Hans-Grootekill, one of the small urban streams in Schenectady. And here we see that these are indicators of positive tests for bacteria. But those are the tests that we use to have a handle on how much sewage and how much nutrients are actually going into the Mohawk River. And then that results in challenges for ultimately how we end up addressing the problem. And so there are a lot of issues there. There's a lot of issues there, but I want to hand it off to Jen, because Jen has been quite involved with understanding the pathogens, the large-scale relationship of the pathogens in the river.
Thank you, John. That was very interesting and concerning. Our next presenter is Riverkeeper's Jen Epstein, and I'd like to also thank Rebecca Martin from the Riverkeeper, who's been extremely helpful in putting our program together. Jennifer is an aquatic ecologist with the Riverkeeper since 2013. Jen coordinates the Community Water Quality Monitoring Program, through which Riverkeeper and a network of partners test sites throughout the Hudson River watershed for contamination. Lately, she and her partners have been doing extensive testing in the Mohawk River watershed. Jen has helped develop systems and protocols to support the monitoring program, and she spends much of her time using the community monitoring data as a basis for advocacy, planning, and other applications. Jen, thank you again for being here.
So thank you, Susan, for that introduction. Thank you, all the organizers of this, for inviting me to participate tonight. Now that you've heard about me in my intro, I'd like to just spend a quick minute introducing Riverkeeper before I really get underway. Riverkeeper is a nonprofit membership organization. Our mission is to protect and restore the Hudson River from source to sea and safeguard drinking water supplies through advocacy rooted in community partnerships, science, and law. So the Mohawk is the largest tributary to the Hudson River, and it's a mighty and important ecologically and historically river in its own right. So it's really important to us at Riverkeeper. This photo here is our patrol boat approaching Lock 8 on a water quality sampling run. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about water quality sampling in just a minute. But first, to sort of set the stage, here's a quick look at the town of Colonie, the Hudson and Mohawk rivers, and the town's drinking water intake, surface water intake from the Mohawk right here. The Crescent Dam and the Vischer Ferry Dam bounding that intake on either side, and then the river up to Amsterdam. So the scope of this map is a little bit broad, but as we're talking about a river as a drinking water source, it's important to remember that this water is traveling this course and is being influenced by the land use and the inputs along this course. So as it makes its way to Colonie. So same map now with the municipal drinking water intakes and the municipal wastewater treatment plants in the same area. So the municipal intakes here are the blue. Those are the surface intakes are the blue, Colonie and Cohoes. And then the groundwater intakes are the orange, little faucets. Here's Great Flats Aquifer, which is strongly influenced by the Mohawk. And then you have several wastewater treatment plants. So of course, these wastewater treatment plants are discharging treated effluent into the Mohawk River. The permits that regulate these plants have pollutant limits and monitoring requirements that are specifically designed, knowing that the Mohawk is a drinking water source and designed to protect it as a drinking water source. However, you have Amsterdam and Schenectady upstream, which have combined sewer systems. So these systems are by design legally allowed to discharge raw or partially treated sewage into the Mohawk for short periods of time when there's heavy rains. And in any system, as you saw in John Garver's presentation, leaks and spills and overflows happen, especially where you have aging infrastructure. Another factor to consider when we're talking about wastewater, even treated wastewater, is that it contains nutrients and a category, kind of a catch-all category that we call micropollutants. Micropollutants are things like man-made chemicals that are present in pharmaceutical products, cleaning products, personal care products, pesticides, any man-made chemical that goes down your drain or runs off the land is likely to fall into that bucket of micropollutants. The Latham wastewater treatment plant here also accepts leachate from the Colonie landfill. So this treatment plant is downstream of the Colonie intake, right? But it's upstream of Cohoes. So this is a reminder to us that wastewater treatment plants are discharging things other than human waste. Wastewater treatment systems are designed to remove pathogens and germs. Nutrients, micropollutants, these things typically are not removed during the process. They may be altered. The concentrations may decrease somewhat, but they are not by design going to be removed in the wastewater system. So the takeaway here is that this is a river system that needs to be carefully managed, and that management includes management of these point sources of wastewater treatment plants, among other things. So when we think about measuring the impact of sewage on water from the viewpoint of human health, our number one concern is really the potential for the presence of pathogens. This is why we have sanitation in the first place, right? To stop the transmission of disease caused by people drinking contaminated water. So Riverkeeper's been working with SUNY Cobleskill and SUNY Polytechnic Institute since 2015 to test the Mohawk River. We test for a bacterial group called Enterococcus. In John's presentation, you saw a slide showing these plastic trays with the glowing wells, and the student was holding one of those trays. That's the system that we use to test for Enterococcus. It's entero for short. It lives in the guts of warm-blooded animals. It typically does not make people sick, but when it's present in the water in large amounts, it indicates the presence of animal waste. Enterococcus is recommended by EPA for water quality monitoring. However, in New York State, our standards rely and utilize different indicators. So your state, the state or the town may be referring to other types of fecal indicator bacteria, which are performing the same basic function. They're in the water and they're indicating that there's animal waste. So Enterococcus can come from a range of sources. Human sewage is the highest level concern among those sources because it has the most potential to carry those human pathogens. Human guts, human pathogens, right? The drinking water treatment process includes a step to kill pathogens. And we've heard about the drinking water plant in Colonie. So we know that that is part of the treatment process. The acceptable level of Enterococcus in drinking water is essentially 0. So the plants are monitoring for these fecal indicator bacteria. They're treating the water to remove pathogens. It's good. However, if there's a high concentration of organic matter in the water, the chlorination step can produce disinfection byproducts, and these can be harmful to human health. Disinfection byproducts are regulated, so the plant is also monitoring for these and making sure that the levels of these are within acceptable limits to protect people who are drinking the water, right? But you begin to see how the chlorination can have consequences that aren't necessarily obvious and how the consequences depend on the source water quality. So this slide shows the results of our Enterococcus monitoring work that we've done with SUNY Cobleskill and SUNY Polytechnic. Each rectangle on here is one of our sampling sites. Thank you, John Garver, for the inspiration for this slide. The values are the values inside those rectangles are the geometric mean of samples at each site. Geometric mean is a type of weighted average. So these values here that you see in the boxes are basically weighted averages of all the samples that we have collected at any particular site from 2015 to 2020. We sample once per month from May to October. So we're looking here at averages of like somewhere in the ballpark of 36 samples per site. And the results on this map are coded green or red based on EPA's recommended threshold for safe swimming. Now, as I said, of course, in water treatment, the acceptable level is essentially 0, is undetectable, but we can use these results to sort of get a look at and evaluate water quality within the Mohawk. And what you can see is that water quality varies from place to place along the river. It's higher in Amsterdam, decreases towards Schenectady, increases again, decreases toward Colonie, increases again, right? So it's going up and down as you move along the river. The water quality that we've measured at the site closest upstream of Colonie, which is the Vischer Ferry Dam, is among the best that we've seen in the Mohawk River. So that's really good news. What you don't see here, because this is a long-term average, is that water quality varies from day to day. And rain is a really important factor in that variation. So that's the wastewater part of the picture. Nutrients. Nutrients are a natural part of aquatic ecosystems. They tend to cause problems when they are present in excess. So in fresh waters, phosphorus is the #1 concern because under natural, undeveloped, undisturbed conditions, it's usually in the shortest supply. So when you add phosphorus to a river or lake, life responds by growing. You get a lot of growth of plant matter and algal and algal matter. Wastewater effluent, including treated effluent, contains a lot of phosphorus. It's a big phosphorus source. So the picture here on this slide is the Wallkill River in 2016, and the Wallkill is located in the mid-Hudson region. It's much smaller than the Mohawk, but it has some parallels in terms of hydrologic modifications, the dams, channel straightening, and this photo shows the kind of condition that an overabundance of phosphorus can create. So in 2016, algae in the Wallkill grew explosively and turned the river bright green. This is a harmful algal bloom. This condition in the Wallkill persisted for 60 days in various places over 30 miles. So it wasn't this green everywhere all the time. It ebbed and flowed. It's really unusual to see this type of algal bloom in a river. It's a warning. Warm temperatures, stagnant water, or slow-moving water, nutrient inputs are sort of a recipe to produce algal blooms, and climate change, including changes in temperature, changes in precipitation, changes in flow, are really going to matter for these. So one way that algal growth causes problems for drinking water at this level, or even somewhat below this level, is the production of organic matter. Again, the potential for disinfection byproducts and the need to monitor and the need to treat the water to prevent the formation of those byproducts. The blooms also may produce toxins. And again, toxins are regulated. There are guidelines for monitoring and there are guidelines for safe levels. But again, we're seeing here these layers of potential risk and these layers of complicated management that start to crop up that can arise from poor water quality in the source water. So the Mohawk River has a phosphorus level that's in exceedance of what DEC deems an acceptable level for drinking water supply. So DEC is in the process of developing a type of plan for the river called a total maximum daily load. The plan to reduce the inputs of phosphorus into the river. And DEC is doing an intensive analysis of monitoring data, of flow data, of runoff sources, of point sources, of discharges like wastewater treatment plants, in order to determine what changes are needed to bring down the phosphorus levels to acceptable levels in the river. The target area for the plan is the mouth of the river. So the phosphorus levels in your drinking water supply are going to be the measure of success for this plan, which is fantastic. But all of the area of the watershed, so all of this shaded blue area, will be considered eligible for projects to reduce phosphorus. So the place where we're measuring impact is here, but we can do actions all around the watershed. These total maximum daily loads are a really big deal in the sort of like state and federal Clean Water Act bureaucracy. And so once the plan is complete and projects that are going to achieve these prescribed reductions are on the table, these will be really strong candidates for getting state and federal funding. So the final thing I want to share has to do with source water protection planning. And I have two things on that. So first of all, New York State has a new program for drinking water source protection planning. The multi-agency program, so Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Health, Ag and Markets, and state have all come together to produce a comprehensive framework for source water protection planning. Municipalities in this framework, they're able to look at their drinking water sources comprehensively, all the sources, and stakeholder engagement is a pillar of it. And so through this program, the municipality is able to assess the condition and the threats, some of which we've just reviewed in the past few minutes, and then identify priorities for protection and restoration and management methods. And intermunicipal collaboration is encouraged in this program, which is clearly important for Colony. So one step toward that could be that to use Riverkeeper's source water protection scorecard. This is a tool that Riverkeeper's developed. It's essentially a questionnaire that covers various important policies and strategies for source water protection and assesses whether they're in place or not. And it's it can be something that can help you to sort of get a handle on the lay of the land, right? A handle on the issues and what's going on, and be a step toward either engaging with the state framework or applying for funding to do so. So the link to this is right here at the bottom, and I can also put that in the chat for somebody to pop into Facebook as well. So that's what I've got for you, and I'm happy to hand it to Bill, who's going to talk about the nuts and bolts of how municipalities really do this.
All right, great. Thank you, Jen. That was quite a lot to chew on. That's a lot. Okay, our final presenter is Bill Carlos. Bill has a variety of wonderful experience. Bill is a retired chief of police of Putnam County. I think I got that right. Where one of his main concerns was protecting public safety threatened by Indian Point Nuclear Facility. He's a 4-term member of the Poughkeepsie Town Board and has served on the Poughkeepsie Joint Water Board for 8 years, as chairman for 1 year and also as vice chairman. Bill is a founder of the Hudson 7, which has a longer name, but I don't have that name, which is a coalition of 7 communities whose primary or sole water source is the Hudson River. This group is fundamental to protecting their communities from threats to the river. Bill, take it away.
Thank you, Susan. And thanks to John and Jen for the information. I'm going to come from a different angle. I'm a retired chief of police. And for the last 10, almost 11 years of my police career, the community I served was in the 10-mile circle for Indian Point. I hope I do this right. So every quarter, every event, everything that went on, I was at the plant or I got the information. Con Edison took this stuff really seriously. So did the State Power and Electric. So there was a change in me that happened because of this. In police work, you're directed towards go to the problem, handle the problem, and go to the next problem. When you deal with something like this, that's not the normal way for a cop to think. And I changed. It's not so much the event with these kinds of things. It's what happens when the event happens. So I get on the Joint Water Board. I'm a retired cop. And I'm at my 4th or 5th meeting. And it was this gorgeous spring day. And I'm looking out the window from our plant across the river. And this is what I see. So I say to the whole group, what happens if one of those goes in the river? And 2 different people from 2 different sides of the room said, we're screwed. Well, that's not in my language coming from the background I have. So we start then. That was the first time I met Riverkeeper. I called Riverkeeper looking for information on events happening along rivers, where things go into the river, where there's contamination, explosions. And I said to them, I wanted to have a meeting with them to indicate what the problem is across our nation and with the Coast Guard and with DEC to see if we can start building a plan to deal with it. That was the goal. That's what happened.
Bill, I have to stop you a second. We can't see your screen.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Can you screen share?
Okay, let me do that.
Okay.
That it?
Yes.
Okay. So
I'm not sure about that. Great.
We had some meetings. It's a little further down, but I'm not going to let it bother you. So we started with that, And the city and the town started to plan backup supplies for our plant. I thought it was going pretty good. The local power authority came in for a meeting. They asked for it and they came in and they said, we have a consent decree from DEC to remove the coal tar from the river shore and from in the river just off Poughkeepsie. If you're familiar with the walkway across the river, it's about the midpoint of a 4-mile straightaway of the river. And right below that, right on the shoreline, is where the manufactured gas plant was. Back in 1911, 1913, they would put coal in a big bin and they'd use a boiler to push steam through the coal. They would collect it at the top, condense it, and send it out through the pipes, and that's gas light. The city of Poughkeepsie for heating, that kind of stuff. The byproduct, when that steam gets all the gas out of it, what you're left is with coal tar. It's thick, viscous, it smells terrible, but we also use it as driveway sealer. So Central Hudson comes in and they say, we have to do this, we want to start, and they have a plan. We were concerned, the Joint Water Board, over our intakes and getting any kind of substances into our water plant. The first thing Central Hudson had to do was put some sheeting along the river. The first day they started that, you're looking at a picture that shows sheen inside our collector tank. For the sheen to get to that point, it had to go through our intakes, which are 1,000 feet offshore and down 70 feet. Whoa. Up through our up lift pump station and up into the plant, and then out into the collector tanks. The people that were there that day told me that it was a very strong smell of a gasoline oil kind of smell. So we shut down. The men who work in these water plants are fantastic individuals. They clean that thing like you were cleaning your kitchen. Everything was out of it. Everything is done. We turn the water back on and the plant back on, and we do a press release. Well, when the press release gets out there, Central Hudson said to me, not to everybody, that's not our sheen.
Oh.
Okay. So what I said when the reporter called me was, the plant's been here from 1869, 4 years after the Civil War. No sheen. They start digging in the shore, we got sheen. You make up your own mind. Okay, now, if I can get to the next picture, I think it's here. There I go. You can see this. Can you see it? It's a picture of the shore.
Yeah.
Okay. You can see the yellow string. That's their containment.
Whoops.
That's to contain anything that comes off the shore. They're working right along the shoreline and installing barrier to prevent the water from going onto the shore and from the shore going into the water. That's the sheen.
That's the sheen.
Okay. Our intakes are about 3,000 feet towards the upper left corner of this picture and down about 70 feet. I have to compliment Central Hudson. Once we had the conversation, they have been very good. The idea of what was in the water is what has me sitting here and talking with you now. This, I couldn't get all the pages on. This is the chemical report that was done on the sheen that you saw in the collector tank. The ones in red are known carcinogens. There were about 6 more on the next page. I didn't want to take the whole thing to do it that way. So the sheen that was in our collector tank had known carcinogens in it. We got it cleaned out. We haven't had an impact since. We had a meeting with Central Hudson, and this is the point that I think is important in what we say or do about this. We talked about they want to continue with this plan. They're going to use a bucket dredge to lift the coal tar out of the riverbed and put it in a barge. Now, if you've ever seen pictures of dredges working, they make this big scoop and all the water and stuff pours out of it. Nobody on the water board wanted to do that. So we had the conversation. The conversation was with some people from Central Hudson, myself and the water plant manager, and we said this. If you get contamination to our pipes and we have to shut down the plant, we have about 36 hours, maybe 40 hours of backup. The city of Poughkeepsie has a reservoir, town has big tanks, about 36 hours, 40 hours. Then there's no water in the water mains. That's no flushing toilets, no putting fires out, no water. Then I looked at them and I said, right here is Vassar Brothers Hospital. And half a mile up that way is Mid-Hudson Regional. No water to put fires out, no waters to flush toilets. We're going to have to move those people. This is much bigger than Dutchess County, much bigger than the state of New York. Just think about physically doing that. Ambulances going where? And then the intensive care units. Let's add to that. How about 14 or 15 nursing homes? No water to flush toilets or put fires out. How about 3 colleges, each with dormitories, hundreds of students? How about the county jail? 400 inmates. So I said to them, this is going to be much bigger than us. It's going to involve everybody. But you see, there's one thing we don't have to worry about. And they looked at me and I said, that's paying for it. In New York State, if you are aware of a risk and you consciously disregard it, you are acting recklessly. So whatever happens, you were aware of the risk and you consciously disregard it. Sometimes you have to hit somebody with a stone to get their attention to listen to you. That was what did it. They have been a tremendous partner to this point. DEC stepped up to the plate. They pulled the permit. Our county Department of Health, State Department of Health, right on it. They all learned from this, of the impact of something like that. So when I was asked to do this, I wanted to accomplish what I just did in real hard terms. I was looking for railroad tracks along, pictures of them along your Mohawk, and I found this one. This is about 18 miles upstream from your intakes at Colonie. If you have a rail car incident there, trying to get to it, fix it, bad weather, the winter time, you're going to have to shut your water system down. So if you take a step back, and I'm not talking about what John or Jean or Jen did, I'm talking about an emergency staring you in the face. It's not going to end quick and has significant threats to the community. So as you go forward, please think there's a lot more involved here than just whether or not there's an algae bloom in a reservoir someplace. Thank you for your time. I hope I got my point across. I'm done. You're muted.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. Bill, thank you. That was fascinating and frightening for me anyway. Not the only one, I'm sure. We have quite a few questions coming in, so I'm going to start asking, okay? And our presenters, some of these might be obvious to whom they could be addressed, and some of them would not be. So the first question is from Mark in Colonie. He asks, Colonie and Saratoga counties have been experiencing rapid development. Can you comment on the impacts of development decisions that result in loss of open space, loss of forested lands, and increases in runoff and impervious cover on our water resources? Maybe Jen would be a good person for that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you know, to put it really briefly and really bluntly, when you pave over a watershed and you take whatever naturally occurring vegetation was there and replace it with lawns and roads and buildings, it has a detrimental effect on the water quality. And so, you know, so first of all, just to define the term watershed, it's the area of land that drains to any particular water body, right? So when you're looking at the Mohawk River, I showed in one of the pictures the Mohawk watershed and that big blue shaded area. That's all the land that drains to Mohawk, either directly or via tributaries, smaller streams that feed into the bigger streams that feed into the Mohawk. Anything that happens on the land in any of those areas is going to influence the water quality in the Mohawk, be it in a small way for some development that occurs way, way, way up trib, or a big way if it's a bigger development right on the banks of the Mohawk. But cumulatively, that all matters. And, you know, I think the real critical thing to remember here is that Colonie doesn't have decision-making power over those developments that occur outside of its town limits. And so that pressure is, if those developments happen, is not going to be good for the water quality. And that's, yeah, I mean, nutrients, runoff from pavement, like the you know, gasoline or whatever's coming off of cars, et cetera, sediment, silt. It's a wide range of things that overall just degrading to the water quality.
So the vegetation, the natural vegetation and the trees, forested areas, that kind of thing, they filter those natural that natural vegetation filters any runoff and helps keep the watershed waters clean. Is that how?
Yeah. So when rain falls in a forested area, the rain is percolating through the soil. There are processes in the soil that are taking up those nutrients. Plants are taking up those nutrients. And the water's moving a lot more slowly through the system too. So you see not only changes in quality, but you see changes in quantity. If you have a stream that's running through a very urban area and it rains, you see a really quick increase in the flow and then it drops really quick. But if you have a stream that's flowing through a forested area where there's a lot of vegetation, you see that signal from the rain is sort of a broader and slower increasing and decreasing curve. So these are really profound changes to the way that the water cycle works and the way that the water quality is.
Okay. When we look at development decisions, then we should try to limit the amount of impervious material and we should try to increase the green space that's there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of resources out there on strategies for more, for developments that not only preserve water quality, but often do so by preserving other really desirable features, habitats, and green spaces. And then there's also something called green infrastructure, which is built rain gardens, bioswales, which are areas that vegetated areas that water flows through and is able to percolate into the soil. All these different techniques you can use, even within a giant mall parking lot, you can build those little islands between the lanes in such a way that they are taking up this water and helping to reduce pollution and protect the water sources. Yeah.
Okay. Apparently we've got lots of questions, so I'm going to stop asking you to expand, and we're going to have to go faster. Okay, Kevin asks, the American Water Works Association requires water system operators to have a formal climate change plan as they manage their water system. Apparently, the town of Colonie has no such plan. Is it, well, I don't think you're going to want to answer that, this rest of the question, but I guess Kevin wonders if it's appropriate for a town to sell a reservoir without a plan for dealing with climate change. I'm going to ask John. He's more likely to answer that.
That sounds like a reasonable approach. I mean, there's a couple of things that we've pointed out is that climate change will be changing, or is already. I mean, it's changing the nature of the hydrology in the river. So yes, I would say that it's a good thing to be planning for sure.
Okay, great. Ansel, I don't see any more questions. Oh, wait, here. Okay, sorry. Do you see any trends in pollution levels in the Mohawk over the past few years? Are pollution levels more problematic at certain times of the year, and why? Joe asks.
John, do you want to take that and speak kind of broadly, or should I talk about?
I think the Riverkeeper results kind of speak for themselves. If you want to highlight that.
Yeah, we do see changes from year to year. Over the past several years that we've been monitoring, we have seen, really broadly speaking, increases in average entero counts year on year. And so we're trying to understand whether there's something. We're trying to understand what's going on with that. We really don't yet, and we're working with John and with partners at Stoney Cobleskill and at Stoney Poly to kind of dig into the data and see if this is a real trend or if this is just sort of an example of natural variability. But it goes to show that in the same time period as those increases have been happening, you've also had increased investment in wastewater infrastructure, including some big projects in this river. So it goes to show that changes can happen that are counterintuitive and unpredictable over time, that we don't always instantly have a grasp on. Broader than that, there's a lot of different aspects of water quality, and I can't speak to others because I haven't studied them closely.
Okay. Could you tell us, here's a question from Dan. What data do you look at to assess the quality of a raw water source?
Good for Bill.
For Bill?
What data do I look at for quality? I'm going to have a very simple answer. It's what our plant manager gives us every month at the Joint Water Board meeting. We know exactly where we are on every one of them. So
no, I think what the question is directed to is what factors would you look at? And I'm going to ask Jen or John this. What scientific factors or data points do you look at to assess the quality of a potential water source?
John, you want to take it or you want me to take it?
Yeah, why don't you take it?
Let's discuss a couple of big ones. Nutrients because of the algal bloom threats, sewage because of the pathogen threats. Drinking water plants are required under federal and state laws to monitor routinely at various different timescales and frequencies for a long list of different parameters. And each year, they're required to send a report to the residents who are using that water, summarizing whether they've been within the acceptable ranges. And so if somebody's interested in really digging into the sort of big picture, you can look for your town's most recent water quality report, and that'll sort of give you an introduction. They tend to, at least the ones I've seen from my town, they tend to sort of like give a little bit of context as to why things are important too. So it's a nice introduction. And if you can't find it in your stack of mail, you can probably find it on the town website. They come out every year.
If they're not testing, okay. Never mind, let me see. Ansel, I need more questions.
Bill had put a note in the chat about the Hudson 7. Maybe
yes, I know. Bill,
so,
give us a quick rundown on the Hudson 7, because we have that other video to watch.
Okay.
Well,
going through what we went through with the threat to the drinking water we had caused numerous discussions. What came out of that was the communities, there's 7 of us that get the water from the Hudson River, met, talked about it, and they decided to form an intermunicipal council, meaning that each one of the governments had to have the town board or the city council pass a resolution authorizing joining it. It makes it an official, very powerful organization representing 106,000 people and all those communities. That's been formed. Why I wanted to mention it, it's something that you might want to think about for the Mohawk.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one community or 2 communities next to each other having a fight or a problem, and you have 7, 8, I don't know how many communities you have along your Mohawk in the area where you're taking the water from, and they get together, that becomes something that DEC pays close attention to. And it would be something that could very easily help with all of the different issues you have along the Mohawk. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. If you're interested in doing that, if you're from the municipality and you're listening, feel free to contact me and I'll get the information to you from the Hudson 7. It has been a significant, the things that it's done from the anchorages, there's a whole series of things that have happened because 7 communities decided to get together and do it as a group.
that's great. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Bill, we've got a question for you from Richard. Richard asks, how do the citizens convince the colony politicians to appropriately weigh the possibility of a disaster when planning for our water supply?
Citizens tell you. Well, that's kind of a hard question because I'm on the other end of that.
Well, I guess it's asking you because you're on the other end of that.
Okay. What we went through is enough drive. It impacted what the city decided to do with its reservoirs. It impacted the town. For example, when we started the townwide water, we closed our wells because we had townwide water. Well, after what we've gone through, the town is reopening the wells, not to replace the water, but to have a standby supply so there's water in the water mains to flush the toilets and put the fires out.
Okay.
I can't think of anybody who would not think that way in terms of the safety of the population. It's scary to learn it the first time. Just imagine, we have to move all the people out of 2 hospitals because there's no water. You need to have serious people take serious looks at the local place and then make plans, and not only make the plans, but to start to work on the plans. I don't know if in your colony water system, if you have hospitals. I don't know if you have nursing homes, extended healthcare facilities. If you have those things and all of a sudden there's no water, if your plant gets compromised, it has to shut down until it can clean itself and get going. You have a certain built-in buffer. How many hours, how many gallons, whatever it is, it's built into your supply. When you hit the end of that, for us was 36, 40 hours, you're out of water. I can't think of anybody who's in the public business who would not think about things like that. I learned this from Indian Point. You have to make sure your public is protected, period. I hope that
bear in mind that that's largely what the interconnect is all about. So there is a backup, and so that's really, really important to keep the water running in case of emergency. But I sense that the question is really focused on a long-term emergency. And so remember that we're talking about the water that comes in from Albany through the interconnect is finished water, and it comes at a cost. And really what we're talking about here is the threats to the raw water source. And so what the Stoney Creek Reservoir does, it allows for this emergency, just like Bill was saying, this emergency backup for raw water over the long haul if there's a long-term emergency. And I think that's one of the things that concerns me the most is an event that would take months to fix. That would be an expensive proposition, at least my understanding of the way that the contract is written with Albany.
All right, I think we're way past our time here, and all of you have done such a great job. Thank you so very much. We residents of Colony, thank you for the work you do, as well as your work informing us tonight. It's been really, really helpful. And we thank SAVE Colonie, thanks our viewers for joining us this evening. Tonight's forum has addressed broader issues than the town of Colony's consequential decision to sell off our raw water source, the Stoney Creek Reservoir that we've owned since 1953. But SAVE Colonie wanted to be sure that everyone understood what an amazing resource we are talking about, a resource that costs taxpayers about $2.80 each per year.